Spider-Man Far From Home is a sequel that fails in nearly every regard. From the nonsensical plot, the character inconsistencies, and the undercooked world building, the script is a total disaster and needed heavier revisions. While I can respect the attempt it makes to tell its own unique story, the execution is what everyone sees, which makes that the focus of discussion. We'll start with the main character because he's arguably the biggest problem in this movie. After Avengers Endgame, Peter has been grieving over the loss of Tony Stark and is put under pressure to live up to him. He receives a series of calls from Nick Fury, attempting to bring his attention to the elementals, and Peter keeps ignoring this in favor of his vacation. Naturally, Peter takes action when the water elemental shows up, and is soon brought up to speed on the fact that these dangerous creatures have been destroying towns and could destroy the world if they're not stopped in time. The fire elemental is specified as the most powerful, and thus the one that Mysterio couldn't defeat.
I was part of the last battalion left trying to stop them.
There's only one left. Fire.
The strongest of them all. The one that destroyed my Earth. It's the one that took my family.
One may say to call the Avengers, but fake Fury and fake Hill made it immediately clear that's not an option.
What about Thor?
Off-world.
Doctor Strange.
Unavailable.
Captain Marvel.
Don't invoke her name.
So the Avengers seem to be off the table. Mysterio couldn't beat the fire elemental with a battalion, so if Mysterio is left alone this time around, the most likely outcome is that the entire world will get destroyed the same way Mysterio's was. This means everybody Peter knows and loves will suffer and die without Peter's help, so he needs to have a really good reason not to help Mysterio if he were to stay in character.
I mean, I'm just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, sir.
See, now that's some bullshit.
You can't be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man if there's no neighborhood. But if my aunt finds out I left my class trip, she's gonna kill me.
This is a lie. Aunt May herself packed the suit for if a situation like this were to arise.
It's a good thing that I packed your suit, huh?
She would not kill Peter for trying to save the entire world, considering she knows Spider-Man has worked with Doctor Strange to save the universe, and nothing bad happened between them.
Who was that guy that you were with? Was that Mr. Strange?
Doctor Strange, me.
And what's even worse about this reason is that even if Aunt May were to flip out on Peter because he saved the world, that is better than Aunt May and the entire world being dead. And Peter continued to be Spider-Man against Aunt May's wishes in Homecoming, so why would this matter?
My whole class will figure out who I am, and then the whole world will figure out who I am, and then I'm done.
Just one small problem. Hide your identity from who, Peter? The ashes of the planet? You're saying the lives of a billion strangers are more important than my identity?
Maybe.
And while helping out as a risk to his identity, Peter willingly helped fight the water elemental without his costume. Peter left his school bus and risked exposure in broad daylight because he saw an alien ship threaten the city. Do we honestly believe that Peter would prioritize his secret identity over the destruction of the world?
No.
What's important is not standing by and allowing someone to suffer or die because you do nothing. If you don't get that, then you don't get the first thing about being Spider-Man.
This is not a reason he would give to justify letting the entire world get destroyed when he's their last hope in saving it. Now, obviously, Peter is doing this because he wants to enjoy his vacation, but you can't enjoy a vacation when the world is destroyed. You can't plan anything around MJ if the world is destroyed. All of your loved ones are dead if the world is destroyed. He knows that Mysterio's efforts weren't enough to save his own world, even when he had help. He also knows the Avengers aren't available, yet he proceeds to lie his way out of helping.
I'm glad somebody has time to enjoy themselves when there's so much at stake.
This is a really bad reflection of his character already, and there's an element of this that makes it even worse. According to Mysterio's story, these elementals exist in other universes, which means other worlds besides Peter's are going to be at risk of the same world-ending threats. So it's not just Peter's world that he's letting down, he's potentially letting down countless other universes that may be defenseless against the elementals without Mysterio and Spider-Man's help.
And the next, and the next, and the next.
That's a lot of dead people, all because he wanted to have a vacation. Which is strange considering that Peter left Liz at Homecoming in order to stop the Vulture, showcasing his willingness to compromise his personal life and relationships in order to save lives. He was willing to almost suffocate in space just to save one wizard. He was willing to risk a one-way trip to space to save the world. People have tried to defend this by saying Peter is sad about Tony's death, and there's too much that doesn't work about this. First of all, Peter Parker became Spider-Man because his inaction caused Uncle Ben to die.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
So when another mentor of his literally dies to save the entire universe, Peter is just gonna let the rest of his loved ones die and thus nullify the impact Tony's sacrifice would have on Earth? That doesn't make sense. Second of all, he continued to be Spider-Man even after Tony died, and he still fought the water elemental in spite of this. This alone is blatant character assassination. He would never try to find an excuse to not save the world if he has reasons to believe it will die without his help.
So we're just supposed to let people die
Even if we set aside the fact that the entire world is at stake, Spider-Man's help would mitigate the risk of civilian casualties. Peter gets told that 2 villages were destroyed, which should have made it clear to Peter why Fury kept calling him.
A village in Mexico was wiped out by a cyclone. 3 days later, a similar event in Morocco. A village was destroyed by what may well be another world threat.
But Peter doesn't even consider the fact that those villages could have been saved if Spider-Man was there to help. Now people have to live with their hometowns being destroyed or some of their loved ones being lost. But these implications don't matter to Peter, as he shows no remorse or guilt for having ignored Fury so many times upon learning this information. If anything, he doubles down on this by coming up with dishonest excuses not to help. This part of the story doesn't work for Peter's character, and even more issues pile on from there. Peter gets his vacation agenda hacked by Nick Fury, which forces him towards the conflict. On his way there, he gets introduced to the Edith glasses. When Brad gets a photo of Peter and tries to take him out of context, Peter tells Edith to label Brad as a target.
Yeah, he's a target. He's a target.
Initiating strike. Intercept point determined. Releasing kill vehicle.
So, Peter knows that Edith is about to kill Brad, so instead of telling Edith to cancel the drone strike like a normal person, he literally just sits there, like he's in pause mode, which allows the drone to fly all the way from space to wherever they are on Earth, and get close to the bus to shoot Brad. He had a ridiculous amount of time to react, but allowed the drone to get close anyway. Last I checked, Peter was aware of how to deactivate features he doesn't want to be used.
Activating instant kill.
No, I don't want to kill anybody.
Deactivating instant kill.
Even when Peter sees the drone get close to the bus, he literally takes off his glasses when he needs them to deactivate the strike.
You stupid.
For the life of me, I can't understand why Peter doesn't just say, cancel the strike, instead of telling people to look at the baby mountain goats and jump out of the bus when this could draw suspicion to him being Spider-Man. Speaking of his secret identity, he is relentlessly bad at keeping it. He takes off his mask at random during the Venice fights. He brings his web shooters with him in the event that he needs them, but not his suit needed to hide his identity. He jumps off a building and lands on a public street when anyone could see his face. He unmasks himself in what he believes to be a public bar, where anyone could see him unmasked with Mysterio, and take a photo of them to post on social media. And they're talking about superhero stuff in this scene, making it very clear what's going on right now. At the hotel, he changes into his Night Monkey suit and proceeds to discuss their whole plan while the door is literally open for anyone else to hear. He unmasks himself on a public bridge where a superhero fight just happened.
Kind of defeats the whole anonymous superhero thing.
Peter is also really bad at his job. In preparation for the fire elemental fight, he doesn't use Edith to evacuate the city, despite knowing how dangerous this fight will be. The most he does is send his class to the opera, but that doesn't account for the many other people who will be closer to the carnival and will be in more danger. Edith is able to access people's phones to the point of deleting personal files or altering trip schedules. Edith should be able to deliver messages to people and warn them of pressing issues, so I don't believe Peter is incapable of alerting the entire town of the fire elementals. S.H.I.E.L.D. says they can forecast when and where these elementals will show up, yet Peter doesn't use this data to warn all the people in Prague. He, for some reason, doesn't ask Ned to vouch for the validity of this data to aid his classmates in the evacuation. If he did, Ned would have been able to tell Betty why they have to leave the area. But Peter doesn't plan any evacuation whatsoever, which means anyone who dies because they were too close to the fight will be Peter's fault. And he also could have called the fire department, which would have helped mitigate the fires throughout the area, but he can't even be bothered to do that. There was no thought or care whatsoever into public safety, despite knowing what would happen 48 hours ahead of time. As for the last bit of character damage, I just want to direct our attention to a scene in Spider-Man Homecoming. When Peter saw Vulture fall down and his wingsuit explode, he went out of his way to save the Vulture. This is the same guy who threatened to kill everyone he loves and tried to kill Peter numerous times, but Peter chose to save him because he doesn't believe in killing. Fast forward to Spider-Man Far From Home, Mysterio takes a bullet to his body mid-battle, and Peter soon after takes down all the drones. While Mysterio is bleeding out on the floor from a gunshot wound, Peter makes no attempt to save his life. Peter could alert a medical team to his location and his condition, and at least try to save Mysterio's life. He has no idea how much time he has left to live, so he'd have to act quickly in trying to save him. Yet, Peter doesn't care. This is just antithetical to what we saw from him in Homecoming, and it makes it a tad bit awkward when No Way Home is centered around Peter's belief in second chances and not letting his villains die.
Oh, some of these guys are gonna die.
It's their fate.
Strange, have a heart.
Let him bleed.
So, as it stands right now, Peter Parker is pretty much destroyed by this movie.
Yeah. Great.
And by the end of the movie, I cannot understand why Peter doesn't destroy Edith. Seeing the damage it caused, seeing that Peter is against killing or spying on people, he should not be okay with having such a surveillance system that essentially points a gun to everyone on Earth. He even stated that he didn't want to keep them because they almost killed Brad, acknowledging that any mistake with these glasses can be catastrophic, and it does a great deal of damage to the messaging of the movie that Peter doesn't destroy Edith because it ends up overlooking the implications of ever giving someone this level of power over the world. Winter Soldier handles this effectively by having the heroes destroy Project Insight so that the freedoms of the world can't be taken from them. This movie ignores this and pretends this is okay for Peter. With all of these issues in mind, this really does damage the arc they're trying to go for. The progression doesn't make sense because Peter's mistakes are largely out of character, some of which aren't recognized as mistakes by the movie and are rather glossed over. All of this culminates to the scene in the plane with Happy, where they try to have an honest conversation about Peter's struggles, and as a concept, that is good. But when we really break down this plane scene with all the context, it doesn't really work. Happy tries to make a point about how nobody can live up to the image of Iron Man that was left behind, not even Tony Stark. And to prove it, he tells Peter that Tony's life was a mess and that he kept second-guessing himself. This generally works until we reach the end point where Happy tries to imply where Tony went right.
The one thing that he did that he didn't second-guess was picking you.
This implies that unlike Tony's prior mistakes and second guesses, the choice to pick Peter as his successor is different, as if it's the right choice for him to make. But the point of him recruiting Peter in Civil War was that he was misguided. He brought a naive child to engage in a complex political conflict that he never had a place in or understanding of, which Cap points out in the movie.
There's a lot going on here that you don't understand.
Stark said you'd say that.
Tony was desperate for help in that movie. This wasn't a well thought out decision, and as far as keeping Peter as a successor for him, this goes against his point in Homecoming about how he wanted Peter to be better than him as opposed to trying to be like him. Putting that pressure on a naive kid and giving him an army of killer drones led to him trusting someone he shouldn't have with the power to point a gun to anybody on Earth. Tony's decision is wrong. The same way Tony was wrong to warmonger in the first Iron Man movie or to create Ultron without consulting anybody. But this time, it's in opposition to his growth and becoming more responsible and protective of his technology to keep it from falling into the wrong hands.
I don't think Tony would have done what he did if he didn't know that you were going to be here after he was gone.
So you don't think Tony would have saved the universe if he didn't know Peter would be there afterwards? How is that a good message? That just makes Tony seem even less heroic. Yet, Happy is presenting this in a positive light, and this isn't even true. It didn't matter if Peter made it or not because Tony had to make a call to save the universe. Tony didn't know if he had a successor in Iron Man 1, yet he still put himself on the line to stop Obadiah. Tony didn't know if he'd have a successor in the Avengers, yet he still took a one-way trip to space to save the entire city. There was no superhero set to be a successor. This is a completely false framing of Tony's character, and this shouldn't be used to encourage the main hero. It's honestly disrespectful to Iron Man as a character. What Happy would have actually said is that in spite of Tony's mistakes, he did what he had to do to save everyone he could. Instead of letting his mistakes hold him back, he fought to make up for them. Your friends need that, and the world needs that. If Tony could, he would tell you the same, but instead we watch Happy lean into the idea that Tony was right to choose Peter as the next Iron Man, despite also trying to tell Peter that nobody can live up to Tony, and that Tony apparently believed in Peter taking over for him so much that he died for it. Absolutely none of this works. Peter's character is destroyed, his arc doesn't make sense, and the messaging is presented terribly. Aunt May won't take much time to talk about, but it's really strange how they skipped over the fact that she learned Peter Parker is Spider-Man and just jumped to her fully supporting this. Yeah, it makes sense that Aunt May would eventually be okay with it, but we never see how she becomes okay with it. Homecoming clearly set up that she would have a problem with this, and Peter was worried about the consequences of this.
I know you sneak out of this house every night. That's not fine. Peter, you have to tell me what's going on.
May cannot know. I cannot do that to her right now. I mean, everything that's happened with her,
It could have had a really interesting character conflict between Peter and May, and this movie could have followed through with what Homecoming set up, but it didn't, so we're left with nothing. I really don't see the point of setting up such a revelation if there was no plan to do anything with it moving forward.
Whatever.
Let's now talk about Mysterio's overall character, his plan, and inclusion in the narrative. Starting with his origin story, it immediately doesn't make sense. Quentin Beck was an ex-Stark employee who invented the barf technology that we see in Captain America Civil War. Now, we were originally led to believe that Tony Stark created the technology for himself, considering he claims this as his own experiment, and he gives no credit to anyone for designing this. But seeing that this was actually Quentin Beck's creation, he openly takes credit for the technology and leads everybody to believe that this was was his own design, which is interesting considering his whole speech was about funding people's projects and building their own futures.
No streets, no taxes. Reframe the future.
Taking credit for other people's creations is definitely not in character for Tony Stark. In fact, believing that the Stark family steals from others and gets the full recognition was precisely what motivated Whiplash in Iron Man 2.
You come from a family of thieves and butchers. The true history of Stark's name will be written, but your father did to my family over 40 years. Will do to you in 40 minutes.
Iron Man 3 touches upon how Tony creates some of his own villains through his own mistakes, and what was smart about that movie is that they had Tony willingly treat people unfairly before he had his experience in the cave, before he grew more generous and aware of the consequences and implications of his actions. Yet in the Spider-Man movies, they have villain backstories built on Tony wrongfully screwing people over. In the first one, he puts an entire crew at risk of losing their homes, which motivates them into a life of crime. In the second one, he takes credit for someone else's work, then fires him when he gets mad. Now, I get the idea that Beck was meant to be unstable and he's likely omitting context, but there is genuinely no context that justifies taking someone's designs and then presenting it as your own. And I don't think this justifies leaving so many unanswered questions, because with the information we have, how Beck went from Stark employee to Mysterio doesn't fully make sense. Beck implies that the argument they had was in relation to how the illusion tech would actually be applied, as a means of giving some context for why there'd be a fallout to begin with.
Like the holographic system I designed, a revolutionary breakthrough with limitless applications that Tony turned into a self-therapy machine.
I told him it was a mistake, that my technology could change the world. He fired me, said I was unstable.
Now, I have quite a few questions. First of all, the only reason I can imagine for why Tony Stark would be so limiting of the applications of the illusion tech is that if it's not under strong regulations, it could be misused by the public and therefore weaponized. So I imagine the self-therapy treatment would be under regulation of Stark Industries staff, rather than the tech being sold for anyone to own. But if there was ever a concern that the illusion tech could be weaponized, then why would Tony ever fund this project at all? It'd be one thing if this was his own creation, but he allowed Quentin Beck to have the funding to design and develop the illusion tech, when Stark Industries set a standard against projects that could be highly weaponizable.
Imagine if you could hack into the hard drive of any living organism and recode its DNA.
Unfortunately, to my ears, it also sounds highly weaponizable. It's gonna be a no, Aldrich.
The illusion tech can literally utilize anyone's likeness without their consent, or even frame them for serious crimes with ease, or replicate the faces and voices of dead people like the Flash movie did. Yes, I'm aware that Civil War in canon is also guilty of this, and I don't like that either. But Far From Home makes it worse by establishing that Tony funded someone to do this despite how easily this tech can be weaponized, and when Tony fires Beck for being unstable, he doesn't put him under any kind of watch list. If he did, Edith would have warned Peter about him at the bar. Again, Beck is someone Tony perceives to be highly unstable, with access to illusion tech that can replicate anyone's voices and looks to 100% realism. With that technology, you can quite literally ruin any legal standards used for evidence. You can conduct really dangerous scams. It's ridiculous that Tony would ever fund this, and it's extra ridiculous that Tony didn't take any precautions in case he snaps one day and uses the illusion tech to his advantage. You know, kinda like the many villains he created in the past. Tony didn't keep tabs on Beck, or, you know, alert Nick Fury about this guy so he keeps him in their files. It'd be really suspicious if all these ex-Stark employees just started grouping up to pray for Tony's downfall. If only there were people looking into this.
No. This is a little below their pay grade. You didn't learn your lesson last time. It's cool. We can give you a refresher course.
This already does significant damage to Tony Stark, and there's plenty more about his backstory to dig into. William was able to arm the illusions to simulate the damage done to the cities. He did so by utilizing Stark Industries drones.
Next to William. The integration of my illusion tech with your weaponized drones was brilliant.
This makes negative sense because those designs did not exist while William was working for Stark. These were new creations, part of the Edith network. These drones didn't exist in 2008, which is when Stark shut down weapons manufacturing, hence why there was no protocol for them until Far From Home. So how does William have the exact same design we see in the Edith satellites?
The story you created of a soldier from another Earth named Quentin fighting space monsters?
The implication here is that Quentin Beck isn't even this guy's real name. Now, if Beck felt the need to change his name to conceal his identity, why does he show his face the second he meets with Nick Fury? Your face can be tied to your real name that you clearly wanted hidden. in. For all Beck knows, his identity could be on file because of what he did at Stark Industries that would have gotten him fired. Stark could have warned people about Beck considering the technology he has access to. He could have picked any face, but he chose the one that would be tied to the identity of an ex-Stark employee who got fired for being unstable, a face which he's okay with S.H.I.E.L.D. and the rest of the world seeing.
I am trying to fool 7 billion people here, including Nick Fury, who happens to be the most paranoid and most dangerous person on the planet. And if he catches on before I've killed him, then he will put a bullet in my head.
If Beck knows this about Fury, he should never have shown his face.
Staging electromagnetic pulses at each attack site so Fury's own satellites would confirm our lies. Inspired idea.
So the lies in question are that the elementals would show up at specific coordinates at a specific time, and will destroy the city or the world if they're not stopped. First of all, to create a believable threat to the world, you don't need to give them alerts on when and where this will happen ahead of time. That's never been a thing with Loki, Ultron, Zemo, you name it. These events can just happen spontaneously, and it's honestly better if they do, because giving people a warning ahead of time only gives them more opportunities to react. Mysterio has told S.H.I.E.L.D. that the world is at risk and they have 48 hours to react.
The elementals are here now, attacking the same coordinates. Our satellites confirm it.
And it will be in Prague in approximately 48 hours.
48 hours is a lot of time to gather Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, the Hulk. I'm not gonna name them all because you get the gist. If this were an event happening spontaneously, then you would not have that prep time. Why is Mysterio giving the Avengers prep time when this increases the likelihood of his illusions being destroyed? If Captain Marvel shoots at any of these creatures, the drones will get destroyed and expose the illusion. If the Hulk jumps at any of these creatures, he will see the illusion from the inside. Don't even get me started on Doctor Strange. This plan with the EMP is actually more likely to backfire than help. But on top of this, if the EMPs are being used to mark the locations, and are increasing at a rate that implies a monster will form in about 48 hours, then this opens an opportunity to investigate these coordinates before the monsters show up. S.H.I.E.L.D. or Edith can literally trace these EMPs.
Friday, you get me a source on that outage?
What happens if S.H.I.E.L.D., led by the most paranoid and most dangerous person on the planet, goes to investigate these sites to see if there's a way to prevent the birth of these elementals? Would Mysterio have a good answer for why that's not an option? What if S.H.I.E.L.D. does it out of suspicion, to try to confirm if these are really caused by the formation of the elementals, or if these are manufactured through technology? Considering you were kind enough to give them exact locations, the investigation shouldn't take too long.
Good job.
How does this plan with the EMP confirm your lies? If anything, this gives them an opportunity to expose your lies. What is so bad about creating these monsters at seemingly random times and reacting based on that? It doesn't matter if they see an energy pulse or not. That is a big monster. Common sense tells you that is an Avengers level threat.
Big monster!
To Janice. After Tony died, she was the one who discovered that Edith was being handed over not to us, but to a child.
How could Janice figure this out? Why would Tony disclose this information to anybody? Tony cares to keep Peter's secret identity, so he wouldn't expose the fact that Peter is supposed to be his successor. The entire backstory behind Mysterio and his crew is nonsensical, and it's funny how Mysterio is talking about this in what he is trying to portray as a public bar that two superheroes just went to. You can literally see what's happening through the windows, and Mysterio proceeds to expose the illusion and talk about his criminal activities here. Imagine if Peter came back to talk to Beck for any reason at all.
Leader of the 110th Street Gang.
And this is barely scratching the surface of the problems with his plans. Mysterio genuinely does not have a plan for if heroes like Spider-Man, the new Captain America, War Machine, or any of the other heroes with X-ray or thermal vision utilize those features and end up seeing the drones in battle. He has no plan for if powerful heroes like Captain Marvel or Doctor Strange show up and break the illusion with their mere power. Earlier, I discussed a mitigating factor he could have relied on, but he for some reason chose an option that heightened the chances of the Avengers showing up to what he proclaims are Avengers-level threats.
If I'm gonna be the next Iron Man, I need to save the world from an Avengers-level threat. Okay, people, no Avengers coming. We're good to go.
And perhaps this leads into a bigger problem, the fact that Mysterio is trying to join the Avengers instead of serving as a solo hero. If the elementals are Mysterio's area of expertise, then he could easily create the excuse that he doesn't want other heroes to physically interfere with the elementals because they don't understand how they work, and will likely cause more problems if they try to help him, such as indirectly helping the elementals grow more powerful, falling for one of their traps, or simply being harmed by them. He could even exaggerate the consequences of the slightest mistake. He could also stress the importance that he deals with them using his unique magic, and have the other heroes focused on rescuing civilians. And this would help Mysterio stand out because without even being an Avenger, he is able to take on the most dangerous mystical threats out there without any combat assistance. It is significantly less risky than the plans he went with. What happens if he gets called for a mission with the Avengers and actually has to deal with a threat? If he was his own hero, constantly dealing with mystical threats that only he can understand, then he would have a justification not to be with the Avengers so often, or even claim that he's protecting other universes from other threats. Another problem is that his drones are insanely ineffective. At the beginning of the movie, he has left his drones open to potentially be shot by Fury and Hill's bullets, but you know what could have fixed this? Making these drones bulletproof, like the Iron Man suit were shown in the final battle that they can be shot down, which means Mysterio did not think of this for some reason. And what's even more damning is that these drones actually use bullets to try simulating the damage.
They what?
The illusion test scene literally shows Mysterio using live rounds to tear down structures.
Why?
The drones literally have lasers and pulse blasts that can knock down structures without leaving a trace. Instead, Mysterio pulls a BVS Lex Luthor and actually uses bullets to take down these buildings, which literally leaves behind evidence that these fights are being manufactured. He's literally self-sabotaging every time he weaponizes the drones.
Leader of the 110th Street Gang.
He also has this entire plot to try tricking Peter into handing him the Edith glasses so that he can gain access to the drones. And why does he need Edith so badly for this?
Uploading software hack to Edith Network. With our drones, we'll be able to create an event big enough to cover an entire city.
You mean like what we saw at the beginning of the film? We were literally shown that with the drones he had, he was able to destroy an entire city. You're telling me he needs Edith to destroy an entire city? I'm aware that having more drones and Edith's capabilities can be helpful, but acquiring Edith in itself comes with so many major risks, and the only reason they give for why Beck tries so hard to obtain it, as if it's somehow a necessary next step, is so he can pull off something he already did without Edith. Now, to discuss what's very risky about this plan, if Quentin Beck is within the Stark Industries files, his face is getting recognized the second Peter uses Edith to identify him. Remember, Quentin Beck wanted his name hidden to avoid being identified, but Edith can identify people with their faces. In fact, being identified is a requirement to be transferred control. So if Quentin Beck's real identity is exposed by Edith, Peter will see the files about him and become suspicious. If Edith warns Peter not to trust him, as Stark has listed him as a suspicious figure, then Quentin has drawn needless suspicion onto himself.
Good job.
And even if we ignore all of that for just a moment, Edith can identify the drones in this bar. Why do you need the drones in this bar to simulate all of this? Why do you have to run the risk here? And this would never happen if he didn't try to trick Peter into giving him Edith. The next big problem with this is that Peter doesn't have to give up Edith to Quentin. What if Peter instead chose to share control with him instead of transferring it? How can Quentin utilize Edith for his plan without Peter being alerted of this? What if Peter utilized Edith in his suit and was privy to how Beck was using it? And even worse, S.H.I.E.L.D. could very easily monitor Edith as a safeguard to prevent Peter from potentially misusing it. What happens if S.H.I.E.L.D. is monitoring the Edith satellite and they see drones randomly pulling out at suspicious times? What happens if Edith was built with protocols that reports its commands to S.H.I.E.L.D. so that Peter can't just misuse it? Beck has no clue what's in store for him the moment he acquires Edith, and there's a very high chance that this could backfire for him, when again, Edith isn't necessary for creating an Avengers level threat.
Okay, we got Edith. Get these connected to our system.
You see that? Right there. That's exactly what I'm talking about. He has never used Edith before. He doesn't know the full extent of its features. And despite this, he doesn't even bother to check how it works. He doesn't bother to explore the system and its features before immediately deciding, yeah, just connect this to my illusion tech system that anyone else connected to the Stark network could be privy to, because he's a moron. This is exactly what I mean about how he didn't think through his plan, even though we're meant to believe that he did.
Not a great plan.
This is going to cause a lot of casualties.
Oh yeah, more casualties, more coverage. When its new savior descends, all those casualties will be forgotten.
Oh yeah, a bunch of people dying in a superhero battle is totally gonna be forgotten by everyone, even though the Sokovia Accords was a product of unforgotten casualties, signed by 117 countries, and literally caused the Avengers to split apart.
117 countries want to sign this. 117, Sam, and you're just like,
all those casualties will be forgotten. All those casualties will be forgotten.
Who's going to avenge my son, Stark? He's dead, and I blame you.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
11 Wakandans were among those killed.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
Victory at the expense of the innocent is no victory at all.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
New York.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
Washington, D.C.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
Sokovia.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
Lagos.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
Those men and women killed in Nigeria.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
Okay, that's enough.
All those casualties will be forgotten.
This moron thinks causing as much death as possible will help him, when it only reflects badly onto him as a hero, as history has shown many times. Why does he think they named it the Sokovia Accords? Wouldn't it look better for Mysterio if he had a minimal amount of casualties in battle? Doesn't that make him look far more competent than any other hero when he's trying to appear as the greatest hero on Earth?
Mysterio will be the greatest hero on Earth.
But sure, let so many people die because nobody will care anyway.
Encouraging, Gallo! Encouraging! I am trying to fool 7 billion people here, including Nick Fury, and if he catches on before I've killed him...
Nick Fury was the first person Mysterio ever met, and because of his high level of credibility in the superhero sphere, he can very easily vouch for Mysterio if Mysterio's secrets are well kept. So why was Mysterio plotting to kill Fury at random? The outcome of killing Fury would be losing someone who can vouch for him, and this would make Mysterio look like a less capable hero because Fury has worked with the Avengers for years and he never died on their watch. All of a sudden, Fury is dead the moment he starts working with Mysterio. Not only is Mysterio going to look incompetent, but this would be a very suspicious circumstance, especially with how good of an escape artist Fury is. You're telling me Fury can escape all of Hydra hunting him down, but not some fat, slow-moving elemental? What if this backfires because Fury has backup plans for this? I would expect this from a skilled tactician who is the most paranoid and most dangerous person on the planet. It's also funny because Mysterio's method of killing Fury was to cloak a drone in front of him while he's in front of a window. Yeah, even if we ignore the many agents that would witness this, what if his building had security scanners that would detect suspicious motion in the area? What if his scanners could detect objects that are cloaked? I don't believe Mysterio accounted for any countermeasures because all it took to foil his assassination attempt was for one agent with a bazooka to fire once, which isn't even that crazy of a backup plan. He did not consider this whatsoever. At this point, it should be very clear why Mysterio doesn't work in this movie. His origin is underdeveloped, his existence is built around character assassination of Tony Stark, and his planning is utterly nonsensical despite how he's meant to be a clever and cautious manipulator. Now, there will be other dumb decisions he makes in the story, but those will fit more in the plot discussion rather than his overarching plans. The world building is very weak in this movie. This is the first movie after Endgame, and I don't think we've learned enough about the world after so many people were brought back. Something that worked in Homecoming was when they took the time to show us Peter's neighborhood, to put us into Peter's world in this larger MCU. It gives us a great understanding of how Peter spends his time and gives character to the setting he's in. In Far From Home, that's entirely dropped. We don't see how the blip affects Peter's connections or the neighborhood as a whole. We don't see how this changes his life or his friends' daily lives. The world building for this is borderline non-existent. Of course, it would have been a good opportunity to show these effects throughout the world considering the story has Peter constantly traveling, but nothing is done to reflect the impact of the blip. There also comes negative implications in the school announcements that show what happens to people when they're brought back. Now in Avengers Endgame, people have brought up that anyone who was in a boat, an air vehicle, on the streets, wherever, would end up dying when brought back to the same location. But since we don't see people actually returning in Endgame, we can safely assume that Bruce would have actually accounted for safety when bringing people back, by commanding the Snap to bring people back without causing any harm. But Far From Home needs to turn this event into a joke, and shows us that during a basketball game, people are immediately brought back where they died no matter what, resulting in them falling over and hurting themselves, which means we can't reasonably infer that Bruce took measures to ensure nobody gets harmed, which actually character assassinates the Avengers because this confirms that there was no discussion on bringing everyone back in a safe manner and avoiding catastrophic results. The lack of careful world building is what caused these massive issues. The premise for the next Iron Man plotline is also nonsensically executed. Iron Man was the head Avenger since the events of Civil War, so his death called into question who would take his place.
Are you the head Avenger now?
No, I'm not. What is it like to take over from Tony Stark?
Those are some big shoes to fill.
They state that this movie takes place 8 months after Endgame, which should have been more than enough time for the Avengers to rebuild their team. Most of them are still alive, and seeing that Sam Wilson took over the role of Captain America, he would be responsible for putting together the team. And even if he didn't think to for whatever reason, Nick Fury would have made sure the team was ready like he did in the original Avengers. Even back in Iron Man 2, he was preparing. So considering this context, it's strange to me that the world expects Spider-Man to be the next Iron Man, as in he becomes the next head Avenger moving forward.
What?
Captain America is literally the designated leader of the Avengers. Spider-Man is an inexperienced hero who mostly operates on street level. Black Panther would have also been a more suitable option. Judging by the school announcements, Black Panther isn't one of the dead Avengers by this point. Like Tony Stark, T'Challa is a wealthy superhero who wants to use said wealth to benefit others.
For the first time in our history, we will be sharing our knowledge and resources. We will work to be an example. We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe.
He has far more experience as a leader than Spider-Man would, considering he's the king of Wakanda. The only argument you can possibly make at this point is that Spider-Man has an Iron Man suit, but War Machine is literally wearing an Iron Man suit and has been for many years longer. Spider-Man was a child when War Machine first started. If we're to take the next Iron Man this literally, why would the world rule out the experienced military guy who leads his own missions?
Boom, you looking for this?
He was so important that they wanted him to represent the United States as Iron Patriot. You're telling me that the world would have picked Spider-Man over War Machine to be the next Iron Man? That doesn't make sense. Another thing that's never addressed is the Sokovia Accords. What changed about it? Does Spider-Man need to sign the Accords to legally remain an Avenger and a superhero? I don't think it's within Spider-Man's character to sign the Accords, and if you want a deeper explanation on that, you can find that in my Spider-Man Homecoming video where I discuss Peter's character. Does Mysterio need to sign on to the Accords before becoming an Avenger? Can S.H.I.E.L.D. legally work with Spider-Man and Mysterio if they don't sign the Accords? There's so little follow-up on some really important elements of the world building in the MCU.
That's just lazy writing.
The plot is filled with problems throughout. This very opening shows Mysterio revealing himself to Fury and Hill. Now, if you recall Avengers 2012, it was standard for S.H.I.E.L.D. to run background checks on the Avengers, even keeping them all on threat watch. If the Skrulls are working under S.H.I.E.L.D. and one of them is taking Fury's position, then I'd assume Fury would have made it standard protocol to not immediately trust what someone tells you and to verify through whatever means you have access to. Mysterio showed them his face, so they can easily tie him to a real identity on Earth that would be suspiciously inactive. And to further verify the truth of the matter, the Skrulls are established to be able to sim recent memories of their host bodies in Captain Marvel.
You think I'm one of those green things?
I'm afraid I'm gonna need proof.
We talking cheek swab or urine sample?
The DNA would match.
Want my AOL password?
Skrulls can only sim recent memories of their host bodies.
Oh.
If the Skrulls can do this, they can immediately disprove Mysterio's story, and the movie is over. S.H.I.E.L.D. also has this egregiously inept way of trying to get in contact with Peter for a situation that they say could be a world-ending event. They send Happy to tell Peter that he's going to get a call from Fury without specifying the importance of it whatsoever. It becomes this drawn-out game of ghosting, and it doesn't end until Peter finally makes it to Europe by sheer chance. What's stopping S.H.I.E.L.D. from just sending an agent to speak to Peter personally? They literally did this in the Avengers to get heroes involved. Why can't they tell Happy that this is a potentially world-ending threat, so Peter responds with the urgency needed? Keep in mind that these Skrulls are essentially S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that would have been trained by Fury and instructed to uphold basic protocols and working with other superheroes. So I'm not going to be accepting the defense that these S.H.I.E.L.D. agents lack common sense because they're not the real Fury and Hill, especially since Talos was a former general of the Skrull Council, and you would need to be highly competent to be in that position of power. And regardless, the real Nick Fury would have prepared them. Not for each and every situation, of course, but for basic communication and protocols, he absolutely would. Later on, Peter takes a plane ride with his class to reach Europe. On the way, he gets his Spider-Man suit through airport security. Somehow, he was able to do this despite the fact that the security dogs were able to detect potentially illegal material later on, and we know for a fact that his suit is filled with things that would not be allowed on the plane, such as his web shooters, the chemicals for the web fluid, the tasers from his taser webs, and whatever Tony built into the suit to have an instant kill feature. I don't know how Peter could get away with this and why Aunt May didn't think of this beforehand, as well as packing his suit in this egregiously blatant manner where anyone would see if his bags got checked. If only she had connections to someone who had a private plane and could deliver this to Peter. S.H.I.E.L.D. continues their slowness streak by talking to Peter about superhero business in the hotel room. No, know the door isn't closed because the teacher shows up without having to open the door, and judging by how voices are still heard while the door is closed, it is idiotic to keep talking about this in this area. They proceed to go to a secret location, and on the way, Peter is given Edith by Fury. I also want to mention that the real Nick Fury instructed Talos to give the glasses over to Peter.
We gave the glasses to Parker about a week ago, like he said.
This in itself is character assassination, considering Edith consists of a drone army and a worldwide surveillance system that essentially points a gun to everyone on Earth and calls it protection. Sound familiar?
Maybe we can salvage what's left.
We're not salvaging anything. We're not just taking down the carriers, Nick. We're taking down S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, it all goes.
Looks like you're giving the orders now, Captain.
You have the courage to take it.
No, I have the courage not to. Artificial intelligence. You never even hesitated. Look me in the eye and tell me you're going to shut him down.
Fury learned that this was a bad thing in Winter Soldier, yet he's complicit in handing a teenager a piece of technology that allows him to send a drone to target anybody he pleases. Fury should know by now that no one should ever have the power to do that. If Tony came to Fury with a plan like this, Fury would have destroyed Edith and the satellite field with drones, and it's definitely a big problem for Tony's character that he would ever entrust Peter with an army of killer drones and the rest of Edith's abilities. If Tony orchestrated this with Nick Fury, then this would have to have been before Infinity War, since Nick Fury was one of the snapped victims, and he never interacted with Tony in Endgame. So at some point in Infinity War, the same movie where Tony didn't want Peter to come with him to space to take down Thanos, he decided that if he were to die on a mission like this, the next Tony Stark with access to all his tech and protocols would be Spider-Man of all people. This is farcical. Let's not forget that Tony Stark is heavily protective of his own technology, so much that he doesn't provide Iron Man suits to his fellow Avengers, even when that would be useful for the Avengers battles.
That's awesome. Give me a suit, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, they're only coded to me.
The reason for this is because he doesn't want his tech to fall into the wrong hands. Tony has only known Peter for a couple of years by this point, and his last significant interaction with Peter involved him hacking into a suit and disobeying his orders. If there's anyone Tony would trust with Edith, it would be people like Happy or Rhodey. Happy was Tony's head of security and one of his best friends, and Rhodey is trusted enough to constantly wear an Iron Man suit. And considering Pepper has grown more accepting of how Tony does things, she would be another better option in holding Edith. Another thing we have to consider is that there's no need to have one singular person with the permissions of Edith. If Rhodey, Happy, and Pepper had shared access to Edith, then Edith would be in the hands of more responsible and trustworthy adults, and they can even hold on to it until they're sure Peter can be trusted with them. I'd even be okay with Peter having the glasses if it was under their supervision and they had to approve major decisions he makes. Why is it locked into the idea that only one person can have it so that there's another Tony Stark? Pepper literally has access to Friday as shown in Endgame. There's no reason she shouldn't have access to Edith.
Friday.
And if Pepper has access to Tony's protocols as well, how is she none the wiser to all of the nonsense involving Peter and Beck throughout this movie? Does she not get alerted when new people have access to Edith? Like a disgruntled employee of the company she's the CEO of? Not only does the premise of Edith not make sense, but it also adds another layer of damage to Tony's character. His message to Peter in Homecoming was for him to not try to be like him, but for him to be better.
I just wanted to be like you.
And I wanted you to be better.
So why is his next move to write down, "For the next Tony Stark, I trust you," and hand it to Peter as if he needs to be like Stark? This entirely conflicts with the message he was trying to give Peter in Homecoming, because this puts Peter back into the mindset that he has to be like Tony Stark, which was where the problem in Homecoming started. This doesn't work. They established that S.H.I.E.L.D. has information on when these elemental attacks will happen, and their satellites confirm it. For some reason, this evidence wasn't shared with the government leaders of Venice to initiate an evacuation. Apparently, S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't know how to evacuate people anymore. But then, when Peter tries to find excuses not to help save the world, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s big brain solution is to give up on arguing and force the class trip over to Prague. S.H.I.E.L.D. should be evacuating Prague, not forcing a bunch of children over to the area where an Avengers-level threat will be. Maybe I'm crazy, but I for some reason struggle to believe that Talos would randomly support endangering children. Someone who has spent his life trying to rescue refugees.
They still won't evacuate the city.
They literally have evidence for what they're claiming will happen. This doesn't make sense. Even if the city refused to evacuate, S.H.I.E.L.D. wouldn't give up. Peter has Edith, which can send alerts to its citizens and redirect people away from the chaos. Talos never instructs Peter to do this. There's no excuse for this. We then proceed to the setup for the bus scene.
Take off your clothes. So I made you this. Another suit.
Sure, it fits fine. I don't really need to try.
Take off your clothes.
No, don't.
Neither of them think to lock the door before doing this, allowing Brad to enter the door. S.H.I.E.L.D. can't protect their secrets from idiot teenagers now. What is going on here?
Leader of the 110th Street Gang.
Why would you pull a gun on a child because he took a photo? Isn't S.H.I.E.L.D. trained to de-escalate? Why didn't Dimitri stop Brad from entering if he was on lookout nearby the bus? Why did Peter wait until the bus drove far away from the bus stop before instructing Edith to delete the photo? Why can't he simply tell Edith to cancel the drone strike? Why is the drone shooting at Brad while Peter is literally in front of Brad? The film explicitly shows us that the drones don't fire when the owner is in the strike zone.
Why aren't these drones firing?
You're in the strike zone. The chance of getting hit is...
And if it's willing to shoot at Brad, why is it doing so one at a time instead of shooting at rapid fire like what we saw in the final battle?
Commencing second strike.
Edith, target Spider-Man.
Copy.
Why doesn't Edith come with a training wheels protocol like what we saw with Peter's suit in Homecoming? Why is there no training whatsoever before allowing Peter to own an army of killer drones? How the hell is this drone army even legal in a post-Project Insight, post-Ultron, and post-Accords MCU? How does nobody hear a drone blowing up right behind them? I know it feels like I'm shotgunning here, but I feel like a lot of these problems are self-evident. The bus scene is really disastrous.
Let's try that again.
Peter didn't cancel the drone strike at this point, so Edith is going to think he wants another drone sent.
Let's try that again.
Whatever, let's move on. Another thing worth noting is that the likely motivation for Tony creating the drones is what Thanos did to the universe. We see him regressing back to his ways of thinking in Age of Ultron, so that's probably what caused him to add the drones onto his list of protocols.
I saw this coming a few years back. I had a vision, I didn't want to believe it.
That what we needed was a pseudo-armor around the world, whether it impacted our precious freedoms or not. That's what we needed. Our best work after the fact, what are the Avengers? We're the Avengers, not the pre-Vengers.
But if we're meant to believe that these drones exist because of events like Thanos, we first have to question why Tony never used them in Endgame, when this would have avoided some deaths on the battlefield. We also have to question why Tony stopped at drones. Don't get me wrong, they're useful, but they can't grab onto anything or lift anything. The Iron Legion could, so why didn't Tony include those in his defense system? He has no reason not to have the Iron Legion at this point, and to discuss the drones themselves, they display capabilities that have some implications. These drones can turn invisible, fire pulse blasts, shoot lasers, shoot missiles, and shoot guns. If Iron Man has mastered cloaking tech, why didn't he create cloaking abilities for his suits? Imagine how useful cloaking tech would be in Avengers Endgame, where they're literally doing a time heist. And if these drones can cloak themselves so well that their weapons are hidden too, imagine the applications this would have in battle. The drones are just a constant source of problems, and they really shouldn't be in this movie. The illusion tech also creates a lot of problems in this movie. In the Prague fight, we see moments where Spider-Man literally tosses boulders at the fire elemental. If the drones are within these monsters, then the boulders should have affected the formation of the drones, thus causing breaks in the illusion. Some might say that the drones are programmed to push out any anomalies that enter the illusion, which would actually be a really smart design detail that Mysterio should have implemented. But we know this isn't the case because when Spider-Man enters the illusion in the final battle, none of the drones react to this, despite the fact that Spider-Man is very clearly an anomaly. To the illusion, I mean. They only react to this because Peter webbed the drones to break formation, and they didn't even automatically try to remove Peter from the area, so we can't infer this is the case when boulders are being tossed at the drones and the elementals. So in order to progress the story, the illusion tech has to be inconsistent. Spider-Man literally webs onto one of these drones and yanks a projector off, which causes the illusion to break up in the illusion test scene. But if that's the case, why didn't this happen in the fire elemental fight, where more active drones were needed? Why wasn't it happening earlier in the illusion test scene when one of the drones still would have had that missing projector? We see that these projectors are needed to cloak their own drone and the ones nearby, so this should have exposed a few drones on top of the glitching. And the movie isn't even fully consistent with this, because when dozens of drones are projecting Mysterio's suit, it malfunctions because one of them is missing a projector. At the end of the movie, a broken drone is on the floor projecting Beck's full body while cloaking the real one. And another issue is that Mysterio doesn't get alerted about the fact that one of his drones loses a projector. I understand that William was dumb enough to withhold this for absolutely no reason, but besides this, while Mysterio was in the fire elemental fight, his system should have warned him automatically, because that literally happens in the final battle when his illusion starts to break formation.
William, I've got drones breaking formation.
the rules of the illusion tech are difficult to follow because they're not consistent at all. Mysterio tries to trick Peter into giving up what he told about Mysterio. When Peter is questioned, his spider sense goes off and warns him that Mysterio is here, but Peter talks to Fury and Hill about it as if he believes they're real. So Mysterio doesn't need to expose anything yet, because the moment that he does, this will open the possibility that Fury and Hill are also Mysterio's illusions. Why does Mysterio reveal that this is a trap in front of Peter? It'd be one thing if Mysterio was sensed because he was approaching the scene. That's a narrative Mysterio could stick with, and it'd be better for him to maintain credibility amongst the projections of Fury and Hill. But instead, Mysterio decides to make it so that this entire building is an illusion, giving Peter no reason to trust anything Fury or Hill say, and even if he's given the chance to talk to them again, Peter would have to check if they're real, which he easily could before conversing. Revealing the illusion like this is stupid. Mysterio then changes the costume Spider-Man is wearing, which is strange since Peter isn't wearing a motion capture suit for this, despite an earlier scene showing us that Beck needed one to project a suit onto himself, which also brings into question how he can just turn his webbing into smoke. His illusions for the elemental fights were shown to be pre-made, and the only possible way for them to adapt on the spot would be for Mysterio to use motion capture technology or controls within the drones. But none of these apply to Peter's suit, so this illusion isn't even possible based on the rules they've given us. Another issue related to this is when Mysterio creates a mirror illusion to reflect all of Peter's movements when Peter, again, doesn't have a motion capture suit on. And we need to recall that Mysterio is only using the drones to weaponize these illusions. How is Peter being physically grabbed? How is he being pushed down? If Peter threw a punch at one of the fake Spider-Men and it actually hit, then it should have broken the drone and exposed part of the illusion. In fact, if Peter threw any punches to resist the force being put onto him, he would have broken the illusion. But instead he just lies down there and takes it for whatever reason. Peter sees a fist dropping onto him and he doesn't move out of the way. Instead he was going to just take it if it was real. And then Beck stages an event where the real Fury shoots Mysterio in the back to expose the entire illusion. But knowing what Mysterio could do, Peter doesn't even check if Fury is real before revealing any information.
No need for ouch!
Yeah, just making sure you're not a bot.
I'm not.
Basic intelligence is thrown off the table. He even implicates Betty when Peter instructed Ned not to tell anyone. He doesn't even know if Betty actually knows, yet he still implicates her.
Maybe Ned told his girlfriend Betty, but that's it.
You really are God's perfect idiot.
And Mysterio doesn't actually need to be here to speak with Peter. Mysterio literally flew to Peter and spoke to him on the spot in an earlier scene, and he's obviously not flying around there to talk to him. Mysterio had an illusion of himself targeting and attacking Spider-Man on the spot, which obviously wasn't actually him. So why does Mysterio need to physically be up close to Spider-Man when impersonating Nick Fury? If Peter did the smart thing and checked if Fury was even real, he could grab Mysterio and beat him up. And even then, Mysterio starts laughing as Fury while Spider-Man is right there and reveals himself in front of Peter. What if Peter immediately punched him across the area after seeing that? Why didn't Peter attack him when he revealed himself? He instead walks backwards when he knows these illusions are fake and he can just rush straight into Mysterio, who is right in front of him. This causes him to get hit by a bullet train by surprise, and Mysterio doesn't even make sure that kills him. Spider-Man is known to catch speeding cars, holding together a collapsing ferry, surviving a literal plane crash, and still beating the Vulture, fighting aliens that scale to the Avengers, all thanks to his enhanced strength and durability. How can Mysterio be sure this would kill him? Why not kill him with the drones, since that ensures that Mysterio has access to the body? Why is he showing himself in broad daylight, when his suit and drones can be seen by any passengers or the conductor on the train? This is a really dumb plan. Peter then calls Happy to pick him up, and he shows up in his plane. Peter gets ready to face Mysterio and sees plenty of options, including the Iron Spider suit. Instead of selecting that, when he knows he's up against killer drones, he opts for a suit where he's still vulnerable to gunfire. And to be honest, Peter should have just told Happy on the phone to come with the Iron Spider suit. On his way, he clearly thought about the fact he'd have to confront Mysterio, and he'd have to know that he has a suit back home that can deflect bullets. Happy is currently in New York right now. I have no clue why he doesn't ask Happy to retrieve that first. His plan to confront Mysterio is even dumber when you consider that he could recreate the spider drone from Homecoming. If he does that, he can fly the drone and use its X-ray vision to track down Mysterio's exact location before leaving the plane. His plan in the movie is to go into the illusion and destroy it, but even if he destroys it, that doesn't tell you a location because Mysterio can be programming this from anywhere.
All I have to do is get on the inside of the illusion, then I can take it down, find him, and he's just a guy.
This doesn't tell you where he is. He can just kill everybody after that.
Not a great plan.
Mysterio then calls the drones for the Stark Industries satellite, yet he doesn't cloak them before deploying them. We have devices that show us what's happening in space, hence why we can track down space debris. S.H.I.E.L.D. could be watching this for all they know. It would be highly suspicious if an army of drones just started approaching the atmosphere at the same time this Avengers-level threat is taking place, and they conveniently don't show up to fight it. Spider-Man then shows up in the illusion, and the drones are all visible inside, despite the fact that every time we've seen them projecting illusions, they've been cloaking themselves as well.
Kill image. Decloak drones.
See, they're supposed to be doing both, so how can Spider-Man see any of these drones? Once Hill destroys the drone in front of Fury, does Mysterio not get any alerts? Because all it takes to kill them is to send a group of invisible drones to shoot them down, since they're now onto him. They could send messages to other heroes or organizations, yet Beck does nothing. Now I want to note this because this is very important. Mysterio told Edith to give him protection. All it took was one drone slamming into Peter for him to be tagged by a drone. This means that if Peter were to be swarmed by drones, he is doomed. If these drones happen to be invisible, he is really doomed. If Mysterio happened to have at least 500 of these drones, Peter is amazingly doomed. Spider-Man has massive plot armor in this fight. Mysterio has 500 drones on him that can turn invisible. Imagine trying to dodge raining bullets coming from an invisible source. There's no way Spider-Man can win if even one merely flying into him can tag him. So many drones are in the background doing absolutely nothing for whatever reason. Mysterio just decided not to cloak the drones when targeting Spider-Man. Mysterio just decided not to cloak himself and relocate so that Peter can no longer have his location. There are several moments where the drones mindlessly fly towards Peter instead of shooting at him and keeping their distance. Mysterio goes after Peter's friends and sends a drone to search for them. Now these are highly intelligent drones driven by Stark AI, so smart that they can identify people immediately and assess the environment on the spot.
That glowy thing is an explosive Chitauri energy core.
Give me an X-ray to the boat and target all the strongest points!
But somehow, the drone confuses a fallen statue with the identifiable targets that Mysterio has marked earlier, allowing MJ to slam onto it and knock it out of control. It's funny that a teenager with a mace can knock this drone out of control, but you know, not literal boulders being tossed at it. And while Mysterio did use manual control to approach them, the weaponry itself was automatic. When we see it shooting, Mysterio's finger wasn't touching it, so the shooting was Edith's doing. A group of drones follow Spider-Man and we see him go behind this car. For a brief moment, they forget Spider-Man is there, and in the next shot, even stop shooting at him mysteriously. For some reason, these drones decide to fly right underneath the car when the goal is to increase altitude faster than Spider-Man can. They're also fast and smart enough to dodge Spider-Man's webbing, so I expect them to be much smarter here. Spider-Man latches onto a drone where there is a horde of drones shooting at Spider-Man, and they conveniently all hit the drone Peter is holding onto, but not Peter himself, even though they'd be firing at the center mass. And again, we have a ridiculous amount of drones in the background doing absolutely nothing. Spider-Man eventually gets pushed into the water, and despite knowing Spider-Man can survive a bullet train hitting him, Mysterio ignores Spider-Man as if falling into the water would kill him. Why didn't he finish him off? He ignores him until Spider-Man comes back.
Oh, great. No webs.
So then why didn't Peter bring extra cartridges like we've seen him use in Homecoming?
I'm in love with Spider-Man's aunt.
Thank you for compromising Peter's identity. A group of drones proceed to shoot at Spider-Man, and Spider-Man has a shield to block them. But Spider-Man eventually drops the shield while bullets would still be spammed at him. So how does he not take damage from this? Spider-Man enters and punches Beck's helmet, and he stops to talk with him. Mysterio still has access to the drones and is still targeting his loved ones. Why doesn't he punch his face to knock him out, or cover his mouth to prevent him from speaking, or grab his device and call off the drones? He just holds him, talks to him, and gets shot for it. And given that Beck still has access to Edith, the drone shouldn't stop targeting his friends. He still made the order to kill them, and we even see his wrist device is still working. And even if those drones stopped pursuing his targets, Edith would still alert Beck of a malfunction, and he would fix it immediately. Edith wouldn't even need to do that anyway, since Edith can still access the drones and just have them continue the killing. Mysterio cloaks the hallway, and Peter now has to fight off the cloaked drones. Peter should not be able to survive this due to the fact that the hallway is incredibly narrow, and we saw a wall of drones show up. He's dead. And even after he takes all of them down, more drones should show up anyway, because Mysterio told Edith to protect him from the start.
You lied to me. I trusted you.
Beck still has control over Edith. Do not let him say a goddamn word. It's also nonsensical because if his friends are being targeted by killer drones, every second matters, yet he stops for a talk with Beck so that Beck can still make orders with his drones. And Beck's final plan to kill Spider-Man is not to send any more invisible drones or even try to escape. he decides to stand next to Peter while suffering a gunshot wound and shoot him with a pistol, even though Peter just took down a bunch of armed drones that went invisible. Why would this be any better when he's just one man?
Not a great plan.
And by now, he should know that Peter can sense danger based on the fact he literally did so earlier in the movie and the scene.
Edith, turn off the drones!
Biometric scan complete. Welcome back, Peter.
How does Peter have Edith back? They explicitly stated that every transfer requires confirmation.
I'd like to transfer your control over to Quentin Beck.
Any transfer will require confirmation.
So if Mysterio has Edith now, Peter can't get it back without his confirmation. This doesn't work at all, which honestly summarizes this entire plot.
It's what happens when you break the canon.
This movie is a disaster. Almost nothing about the writing is good. This is a 1 out of 10 story overall. This is almost as bad as Spider-Man No Way Home, making this the second worst Spider-Man movie. Yes, this is worse than Spider-Man 3 and the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I challenge you to spot as many and as impactful issues in those movies compared to Far From Home. This one stands out for a reason.
Take your shot.
But that's all I gotta say for now. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you want me to review next. I'm all ears. That's all for now. Goodbye.